All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special meeting for July 30th. Join me on the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I expect in a full council tonight, we have two council members that have notified us that they are on the way. So I think what we'll do first is we'll have public comment regarding the item that is on our agenda for discussion tonight. Then we'll go into executive session, and then there will be possible action following that executive session. So I don't have a sign-up sheet because I know it wasn't advertised for public comment, but I see a few people in the room that most likely would like to speak. So we'll just raise hands, and if folks can come up and introduce themselves, state their name, and as always, we take 3 minutes for each speaker, and in respect to each person, we like to limit your time to 3 minutes. So clerk will start a timer. So first gentleman in the green, if you come up.
My name is Dwayne Burnell, and I'm a resident of Bothell here. And I guess my question is that, one, the city ordinance was put in place to protect the environment, and yet it took a lawsuit to overturn the decision of this council to try to change the ordinance. So one, why, and it was, the city lost, and I understand it cost the neighborhood of $50,000 of our tax dollars to fight this lawsuit, and now we're back again to say, hey, let's keep on fighting. So the original ordinance was put in place to protect the environment. It took a lawsuit to fight it, spending tax dollars wastefully. So why are we here? You know, you've lost, and let's keep the environment the way it is. So I'd like your comment, please.
Great, thank you. We're taking public comment tonight.
All right.
All right, thanks. Ma'am? Were you next?
Mayor, just a point of order. We do have policies and procedures on signs that we've enforced in the past that in fairness to everybody in the past, in the present, and the future, that any signs that are in the audience be of what we allow, which I believe that is not what we allow.
That is true. Ma'am in the back with the sign.
Me?
Yes.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, we allow signs of 8.5 by 11. And that is much larger unless it's a metric
And
size.
not on wood pickets.
Yes, it's no longer a sign, now it's part of my clothing.
Man, we don't want to be difficult, but it's true. We hold everybody in the city of Bothell to the same standard.
It's not a sign, it's clothing. It's my outfit. Seriously, it is. I wore it today. Beautiful. Don't you think it's beautiful?
I think that you're actually causing a potential disruption to the meeting. Just ask that you respect everybody in the room and everybody else in the city of Bothell that respects that same rule.
What do you want me to do with it?
Probably just put it down. Thank you so much. Ma'am?
My name is Suzanne Burnell. I'm a hydrogeologist, water resources specialist for over 20 years. We've already shown that the watershed, that North Creek is a salmon-bearing creek that is extremely important for our long-term and, the future habitat of salmon. The city changed the ordinances and in some measure changed them because of the special interests, I would argue, on city council. I notice Councilmember Bill Evans lives in the area but has not recused himself from his special interest. And yet we have a lawsuit or a potential action where the Growth Management Board has upheld the findings that this is a very sensitive watershed. And yet we're here tonight to try to discuss whether the city should spend more taxpayers' dollars fighting, quite frankly, legislation that has been placed and code amendments that have been in place for a long period of time to protect this sensitive watershed. And so I would ask City Council, why is it that special interests on City Council are in fact, it seems to me that there are special interests involved that are in play with respect to wanting to overturn the special protections of this very important watershed. And as an environmental specialist, I don't understand why the city council won't move forward and basically stick with the code that was originally in place to protect this watershed. I find it appalling that we have council members in place that won't recuse themselves or acknowledge their special interests. It's unacceptable to me as a taxpayer, as an environmental specialist, and as someone who lives in Bothell and believes that we are trying to preserve our environment for our children.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Suzanne, okay, thank you. Sir in the back, and then ma'am, Sandy.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. I am Syed Mustafa, resident of Bothell, and I am very concerned about the tax dollars we are spending. We have already spent a lot of money on a case which we have lost, and now we want to appeal that case, and we will be committing ourselves to many years for repaying it. I would suggest that we should leave this decision to the next council. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sandy?
First, I want to thank the council for accepting public comment on this issue. I know it was a 24-hour notice on the meeting, and then, we kind of had to let people know that this issue was going to be discussed. So, first, thank you very much. So, I agree with the speakers that we've had that we can't have a two-headed snake on council. We can't use the GMA to say we must build infill infrastructure, or, homes, so that Bothell ends up looking like an Escher painting on one side and blame the GMA, and then, fight the GMA when it doesn't serve building interests. So that's really kind of like a two-headed conversation that's going on. Now, my hope is that you're all going to go into executive session, and you've already decided not to appeal this case, and we can all go home. But if you don't do that, then we're going to have more of what we've had already, which is a feeling of, well, not a feeling, lack of transparency on the council. And the fact that we decided in public session that we were going to spend $50,000 to fight the case, I don't understand why it has to be an executive session now to appeal the case. So I know you don't want to respond to these questions in this forum, but I will be emailing Joe tomorrow to understand why it has to be executed in this fashion.
Great. Just for clarity, there would be no action until we actually come out after executive session. We get to hear from our attorney, and then we come out as a council and have a conversation after.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy. Ma'am, in the back, in the striped shirt.
Hi, my name is Lynn Anderson, and I live in Bothell. And my biggest problem is another executive session where I can't find out what each of you are saying. I believe I've been checking in with the city manager. This is about the fourth time you've talked about this issue, maybe 3 times in executive session, because I check in after every one now. I still don't believe you guys are being transparent. I agree with Sandy, if you come out and say in public that you're going to spend $50,000, or it could be, I'd like to hear each of your views on this. I'd like to see which of you are siding on what side and the other, and I don't get that. I still believe we have a problem with executive session. I'd like to know at some point where all of you stand on this issue. I don't understand. I believe that there's probably some secretism that needs to go on since we're being sued, our city. But I believe we have a right to know. I shouldn't have to read online, and I'm having to read everything online, and I should be able to find out about all of these things in this meeting that I try to attend every single one, and I'm not. I'm only finding out online, and I don't like finding out online because then I don't know if I'm receiving 100% of the truth or not. So I hope you come back out and share with us what was discussed, who voted what, and maybe I'm still looking for more transparency. Too many executive sessions. Thank you.
Just a quick question, Lynn. You said you're finding out online. Where are you finding out online?
Actually, you all posted that there was a meeting yesterday, about 24 hours before. You all posted
Yeah.
that there was a meeting, and I was going to come regardless. I'm actually really happy with the attendance. I think that this is showing you that this community cares that we have so many people with a 24-hour notice. And then
You found it out
yeah.
on the website, though.
On your
How
website.
is that not transparent to notify?
That's well, but I don't know anything about the lawsuit other than what I've asked. I haven't heard at a meeting. I've had to ask after meetings about it. So if I hadn't asked about meetings, I wouldn't have a picture of all of what's happening other than the $50,000. So I'd like to hear what you all think.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're all in agreement, then I would have to maybe listen and say
Exactly why we're here.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
But I'm not
exactly.
hearing. I'm not. I know you're here.
Because we're taking public comment,
Right.
and then we'll come back
Yeah,
later
great.
in the evening. So just so make clarity for everybody with the agenda, because it sounds like the one that was posted online, which is the one I'm actually reading here. We started out with the Pledge of Allegiance. Then we had roll call. We have public comment, allowing each speaker for 3 minutes. Then we're going into executive session. Then there's possible action that occurs after that, so that's the council coming back up here as a whole to speak on the matter. But we first need to hear legal counsel. And then we'll have adjournment and go on with the rest of our night. So hopefully that's clear to everybody. That's the process. And so you'll be able to hear from counsel. Ma'am in the back, I see your hand.
Hi, I'm Janet DeGrave. I've lived here for 32 years. I had no idea what was going on tonight until I got a Facebook post from Sandy Alto. And then Andy, I friended him on Facebook as far as watching him, and I noticed he's been talking about what was going on this evening. And in response to what was happening, I've brought gifts. Brought gifts of photography from my husband, Kent DeGrave, of 35 years in September. So each of you, if you so choose, can pick out what your favorite picture from the North Creek Fitzgerald sub-area is. Thank you.
That's awfully generous of you. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Mr. Berry?
Celebrating a lot of years in front of you in this process. I just have a few thoughts down here, and to bring up some of the past issues. I won't repeat the details about the Berry family's demise, which in nearly 19 years of this long process has damaged us irreversibly. I won't go into detail about the undertow of hatred, the pall that stains the proceedings, wherein if you don't totally agree with the appeal agenda, you're considered the enemy. It seems a pandemic for the entire nation of no compromise, no facts, if it happens to be inconvenient truth, some sort of entitlement. It's very strange. Let's talk about the pit tests that were performed last spring that don't reveal the groundwater that was assumed to be coming out of Zone 1 of the Fitzgerald sub-area. About the KLN company that spent a great deal of money and resources to work with the staff to help all understand why the critical species habitat doesn't work for Zone 1, why Zone 1 doesn't fit the description, the definition, or the science. KLN is pulled out of the deal. They're gone. Topography and gravity determined what influence Zone 1 would or could have on the fishery in question between 240th Southeast and 228th. And it does not apply Zone 1 to any of the three creeks of importance, but there are no studies performed for Zone 1, other than that private money. Just one assumption that was voiced professionally after 17 years of, or months rather, of deliberations, closely followed by the financial crunch beginning in late 2007. We are honestly sick and we're tired. We've been incredibly patient. The assumption that we can make pretty assuredly is that the owners of Zone 1 don't much matter. We've been left out of the consideration. We're old. We're truly beaten. We are nearly at the end of our rope and considered somebody's enemy now on the wrong side of history. There's been some talk about conflict of interest, but it's never mentioned that the fact that the petitioners live in the critical species habitat, and they've carved out a nice niche for themselves that all of us are expected to support with our loss. That's nice for them. They'll spout legalities and endless language that most of us don't speak or understand, and it confuses the issue of the simple facts. It's quite an endeavor. It seems a serious hobby that leaves us and our lives in its wake. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Others? Anyone else wish to speak tonight? Sir, in the back.
Jim Phillips, and I live in Bothell. The Fitzgerald sub-area is a very important area. There is absolutely no question about that. Zone 1 in the Fitzgerald sub-area should never have been included in the North Creek Valley to speak of. It has development. That hillside has development from 228th all the way down to on 240th, the Decker property, and further south there is housing projects, and that is all the same hillside. The last developer that had most of the people on that hillside under contract, they did 5 different studies, one of which was the pit test, to determine if there was any substantial groundwater and so on, and they found that there was none. In fact, most of it is they were very pleased with the pit test results, and those are available. I just really request, saving the North Creek Valley is an important thing. But Zone 1, inside the city limits of Bothell, is an extremely developable area. And really that is what growth management wants. They want development in the urban areas. They don't want it to sprawl out. They want it where the infrastructure is available. And Zone 1 is just really, it shouldn't have been included in the Fitzgerald North Creek Valley. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to address council this evening? Ma'am?
My name's Helen Martinson, and I'm a Bothell. I live in Bothell. And I just want to say, I'm wondering how much longer this goes on with the Growth Management Act. Our traffic is hideous. Our schools are overcrowded. We have kindergartners that are going to be in portables. The air quality has changed a lot. I have lived here my entire life, and I cannot believe what's happening. And I don't understand the buffer zones between new development and old development. Over by where I live, they tore down all our old growth evergreen trees. This is the evergreen state, and we're tearing these down as if they have no meaning at all. And these houses that are already developed, or that are already there, have like one tiny little row of trees behind them blocking them from this new development. I don't understand any of this. I'm actually very ashamed that all of this is happening. I understand people need a place to live, but when does it end? How many more people do we cram in here? How many more cars? How many more children without a place to go to school? That's all.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? No one else? Okay. Thank you all. We're going to be going into executive session.
Point of order.
What's the question?
I have 3 points of order. First of all, I want to state for the record that I object to this meeting in the first place. We were notified of this the Growth Management Hearing Board decision last Wednesday, and as of yesterday, 28 hours ago, this meeting has been convened. And I think if we've learned about that decision a week ago, convening a meeting for tonight with 28 hours notice is unacceptable. Second of all, my question is to the city attorney, how does meeting under an executive session meet the requirements of an executive session in RCW? We are not under litigation. This is not a lawsuit from the Growth Management Hearing Board. This is conclusion from the hearings board and requirement to follow their direction. We already have existing code in place, and they are remanding it to City Council for review. So I would like to know, how does this meet the confines of executive session as defined in RCW 4230-110?
Wish to answer.
This is pending and potential litigation both. As long as the appeals time is running, we are in litigation, so it is pending litigation, and it is the council's prerogative whether they appeal this, and it is a decision for council. It's a proper decision for council, so it's potential litigation in that regard as well. So it's entirely under the executive session rules. That is one of the main reasons for going into executive session, to allow for legal advice and interaction with counsel to advise and to provide the legal background that is confidential under the law to make a decision.
But we are discussing a hearings board decision that is public knowledge. And so we could have this discussion in the public forum. We do not need to go into executive session.
Do you have a third point?
I do have a third point. I would like to ask Council members Lamb and Evans to recuse themselves from further discussions on this issue.
Okay. So to your first point that you brought up, your point of order, that special session is out of order. It's not. It's
I didn't say it was out of order.
Yeah.
I said I object to us
So you
scheduling
object.
it.
Well, you're allowed to certainly have your opinion on it, but it's certainly, for the listening audience and everyone here present, is fully within our protocol manual, and nothing has been done.
And
or
what is legal and what is right are two different things, which we have
there's
discussed here
nothing
before.
wrong that has occurred here at all. So we have a 30-day appeal period, just so everybody in the listening audience knows. A 30-day appeal period that occurs, and I think the decision came out on the 22nd, so we're 8 days past that. So we have 22 days to go forward if a decision is made by the full council here. That's a short period of time, and so a decision was made to pull together a meeting, which was within our protocol rights to do, and so that's what I did, and we sit here before us. So we're going to go into executive session.
No, I have asked.
30 minutes.
No, I have asked that two members of council recuse themselves. I have the right of point of order to ask them to recuse themselves. If they refuse to recuse themselves, then it goes to a vote of the council.
All right, if all council members can return to the dais. All right, Bothell City Council is back in session after executive session. We're here to discuss the matter regarding the recent appeal.
Point of order.
Yes, what is your point of order?
I would like to repeat my request that Councilmember Lamb recuse himself from the deliberations.
Would you like to answer that request?
I've consulted with the city attorney on this matter and consulted with the city manager on this matter, and although I'm not going to discuss what our conversation was, I'm not going to recuse myself from this debate.
Then I would ask the chair to call the question of, and survey the rest of the council and vote whether he should recuse himself or not.
Call the question.
I'm not sure that's how it works under our protocol manual.
And the reason why I am requesting this, as I stated previously, is that Councilmember Lamb is a representative and legal representation for several of the property owners of which this appeal would directly affect, and I think that affects his ability to make a decision on this matter in an unbiased fashion.
So Councilmember Sandberg has now said something. I don't know the protocol in terms of doing this, but I would like to address her. The vote on this matter that was taken was in November of last year to make the changes that we made to the code. There was absolutely no legal representation or no contractual representation of any kind at that time. The decision that we're making tonight is whether or not that decision, which was challenged by Ms. Agard in the Growth Management Hearings Board, should be appealed or not. I have discussed that with our city attorney, and I've discussed that with our city manager. I don't believe that I need to recuse myself in this debate.
I'd like to respond. And although you did not,
to find out, as a point of order, I'd like to find out what the protocol is for this challenge, because Councilmember Rayum also has spoken out directly on this decision, and which is a violation of our protocol manual. So I would challenge him to recuse himself. If you're going to challenge me to recuse myself, I would challenge Councilor Rayum to recuse himself on this matter, because he has spoken out directly on this. He said a panel of 3 judges made a ruling in this case. Not one of those individuals is a judge, incidentally, but that was his comment. He said otherwise these creeks would have been destroyed. So he's saying that the city's position was to destroy 2 creeks if that were upheld. He applauded the decision, which is directly contrary to our protocol manual, for him to continue in this discussion. So do you believe he should recuse himself based on those comments?
I am fine if the 2 of you recuse yourselves.
Both of you. We're not in a rug bazaar, Councilmember Sandberg.
You asked if I would support Councilmember Rayum recusing himself, and I think you both are unable to act on this in an unbiased manner. And so I will amend my request and ask that you both recuse yourselves.
Okay, Councilmember Rayum, wish to respond?
I'm happy to recuse myself. I just want to make a statement. 2 things. First of all, I made my comments as a campaign issue. I am running for re-election to office, and in the state law, I have every right to express my opinion, whether it is with or without the majority of this council. Just so happens in our protocol manual that apparently we can't actually have a freedom of speech when you're running for re-election and state your opinion so people know where you stand versus the majority of council. So that was read to, I'm fine with recusing myself. I have no problem with it. The other thing I would like to say, though, before I do, is that I am a watershed ecologist by profession. And when this came to us previously, it was absolutely disheartening to know that the 2 creeks, we have data, there's a 2010 water quality report the city has published that was very clear that the 2 creeks that are in this area are the healthiest ones in the city. So what I said was factual. I guess I wasn't aware. I know about the Pollution Control Hearing Board, and those are indeed judges. that work for the state of Washington. Maybe I need to do my homework on the Growth Management Policy Board, but I assume that they were the same. So, again, I just think that the decision that was made previous and then throwing good money at bad again is a waste of time, but I'm happy to recuse my, I'm sorry, it's a waste of taxpayer money, not time. And I will leave.
So the issue remains if Councilmember Lamb will also voluntarily recuse himself.
Wallace.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Nope.
No? So he's not
So,
recusing himself.
excuse me, by your definition, I just want to make clear, because Councilmember Rayum has expressed an opinion, and by virtue of you representing property owners where you stand to financially benefit, which is also a statement of an opinion.
First of all, Councilmember Sandberg,
I
if
find
you're
it
gonna
interesting
make-
that
you're gonna make
you
that
are
accusation-
saying you are not voluntarily recusing yourself when you have a direct financial interest, and Councilmember Rayum just did. So for that reason, I would like to have the council vote on whether you need to recuse yourself.
You would have to make the motion.
I will make a motion that Councilmember Lamb recuse himself.
There's a motion and a second. Anybody wish to speak to that? I'll be voting against the motion. It's interesting how close to the line some of these things run. Councilmember Rayum decided to remove himself. Obviously, Councilmember Evans has removed himself.
He's not recused himself.
Well, he's
removed himself from the meeting.
Removed himself from the meeting, and we haven't heard his position because he's not currently here. So our protocol manual is clear about why people would need to recuse himself in this situation. I don't believe that Councilmember Lamb needs to recuse himself. So, or us.
I've reviewed the protocol manual. I have reviewed and consulted both our city attorney and our city manager, and I don't believe that I need to recuse myself under this circumstance, so I won't be doing that.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Spivey?
I won't be supporting the motion. I wouldn't, if Councilmember Rayum was included in this, I would not be supporting the motion also. I don't feel the need for him to recuse himself. And after talking with city attorney, I don't see a need for either one of them at this point to recuse themselves.
So at this point, could Councilmember Rayum come back to the dais? Because you said that you don't feel like he needs to recuse himself.
This is starting to be
This isn't a rug bazaar. Yeah.
Do you want to make a comment on the motion on the floor that you placed? Okay, Councilmember Agnew.
I will be supporting the motion. We've had a litany of events that have happened in the city of Bothell, and the citizens have been asking for transparency. And I think we need to show that transparency. I don't know if we are right now today. I hope we are, but for transparency's sake, I will be supporting the motion.
Okay, thank you. Everybody's had a chance to speak on this matter, so the motion was made by Councilmember Sandberg, seconded by Councilmember Agnew. If the clerk can display the vote. Maybe. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no.
No.
So the motion fails. So, it was 2-3, correct. So back to the conversation that we're all here for. Does anybody wish to speak on this matter?
I
Member
do.
Lamb?
So there's a couple of things that I think are important with the Growth Management Hearings Board decision. I think a lot of the rhetoric that we've heard around the issue and a lot of the testimony that we heard really doesn't capture what the regulations were and what the regulations that were challenged. The regulations that were challenged were ones that in a portion of the Fitzgerald subarea, if you had a lot that was entirely paved over, a 1 acre lot, it was completely with concrete. Under the existing law that was challenged, you would have had to rip up half of that lot, that 1 acre lot, and plant a forest on it, a 50%. You would have had to have forest cover on that lot if you wanted to develop it. That was the law that was challenged. They said that is insufficient to protect the environment. In another portion of it, you had the ability to have 60%. If you had a single flat lot, you would have had 60% of it covered with forest. So if you had a parking lot in your backyard or your lot was covered with cement, you would have had to rip that up and plant over 60% of your lot a forest. So when people talk about this, I think it's very, very important. Nobody talked about what the law was that was challenged. The change that this council made that was described as killing the streams and really extreme rhetoric that was attached to it was to say that instead of on your 1 acre lot of planting 60% of that with trees, you then have to plant 50% of that with trees. 1/2 of the lot would be planted with trees. And in another portion, instead of planting a new forest with 50%, half of your land, you would plant it with 40%. That was the radical, crazy change that was being put into effect. And if you were to believe that, that is devastating. That is somehow like paving the way for crazy overdevelopment of the city of Bothell. If you believe that, I would submit to you there's probably not any development, including the one that you live in, that you would ever like. Because a development where half of the land or 40% of the land is improved and is put into forested open space is an environmentally friendly, positive, good law. I would add that that changes on top of the critical areas ordinance, which applies to every other part of the city of Bothell. We have a critical areas ordinance that covers every part of Bothell. If you live in a critical area, it covers you. If you live in a critical area buffer, it covers you. All of that is covered by our critical areas ordinance. That critical areas ordinance is completely unchanged by what the council did in November of last year. What the council did was they said, we'll take forested open space, which means if you had a flat, dry lot, you would have, with no trees on it whatsoever, you would need to plant a forest to develop your land. That's what the law was. That was challenged because the amount of plantings on your land was deemed to be insufficient. I have an enormous amount of respect for this area, and I have an enormous amount of respect for North Creek. It's suggested by Councilmember Sandberg. She was like, oh, there's some conflict here, and, Councilmember Lamb has an interest in this. Well, in fact, I do have an interest in this. I own property in this area. I own a half-acre lot that I've lived at for 15 years with my family. My children play in North Creek. Ms. Agard opposed the development which I live in. She appealed it. She didn't want my house to be built. She probably has forgotten about it because she's appealed pretty much every development that's ever happened in the city of Bothell, but you also appealed the one that I live in. So I guess I would say to the people of Bothell, if you live in a home that's built by a developer, and 98% of you do, at some point there was a group of people who didn't want that to be built. Growth comes with a lot of pains. Growth comes with a lot of aggravation and a lot of new people. But I think to demonize people, I think to attack people personally, and I think to really put through the people in the Fitzgerald sub-area who are subject to these regulations with what they've been put through is not Bothell at its best. We had a really important thing, I think, also to note is that for years and years, the people, and one of them spoke tonight, had to deal with the prospect of a 5-lane road being blown through their property. It was called the 39th Connector, like a $72 million project, which was on the books for, I believe, and Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, was it over 20 years?
Close to that, yes.
Yeah, but close to 20 years. So their homestead, their private area, had a big sign posted that said, proposed land use, 5-lane road going right through their houses. If you wanted to sell that house to another homeowner, you couldn't do that for 20 years because they'd be like, well, what's going on with the road? They drive by the house and be like, I don't know. I don't know. The city of Bothell will eventually completely change the character of that area. That road was proposed to go through a Class 1 wetland. It would have destroyed it. It would have been the most significant environmental impact by far of any of the changes that we've discussed. So in removing that plan, and the council members who voted no voted against removing that, we voted to remove the 39th connector from that plan, which would have had a devastating impact on that wetlands, and we made a extremely modest adjustment to the forest cover requirement, as well as some grading changes and some other changes in there to try to accommodate, on balance, to make the environment a better place in the city of Bothell. I think we succeeded in that. I do believe that the decision with land use in the city of Bothell that we made in November of last year was a good one. And I think it's one that we should get the science, we should get the information that will help us to make a decision. And if we go and hire a scientist and they say, you know what, you're wrong, and the Growth Management Hearings Board is right, and you just need to live with the regulations you have right now, then that's what we should do. But I think we need to get the science on this issue, and I think we need to preserve our legal rights as a city so that we make decisions as an elected body rather than having those decisions completely rest with the Growth Management Hearings Board.
Councilmember Sandberg or Agnew? Agnew? And then Sandberg.
I'd like to read a couple of sentences. One says, the board shall find compliance unless it is determined that the city's action is clearly erroneous in view of the entire record before the board and in light of the goals and requirements of the Growth Management Act. Another sentence on page 21 says, the board is left with the firm and definite conviction that a mistake has been made. Bothell's adoption of the ordinance 2163 is clearly erroneous in the view of the entire record before the board and in light of the goals and requirement to the GMA.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, since you brought those up and I highlighted them, I just want to touch on those, because what that means to me is that the Growth Management Hearings Board doesn't just decide, you know what, we're going to rule against the city because it feels good. There is a very high burden of proof on the petitioners to prove that the city's action is clearly erroneous. Otherwise, the board defers to the cities and the counties. In fact, the board is instructed to, quote, recognize the broad range of discretion that may be exercised by cities. So there was a very high burden of proof that the petitioners needed to make, and they made it because, as Councilmember Agnew reads, the board has the firm and definite conviction that a mistake has been made. And they note in this decision that neither the petitioner nor the city did a really good job of covering the history of this area. And they did an incredible amount of review of not just the two positions before them, but of all the studies that have happened in that area over the years. And I feel that if we move forward with the appeal, we're potentially spending a substantial amount of money. I can't say an exact amount, but a substantial amount of money in legal fees to just appeal this decision, when the board says very clearly that they have a definite conviction that a mistake was made. And so I would counter the argument that this council made a modest adjustment to the Nick Fuchapa area to completely remove effective impervious area limits, which is what the board brought up, to reduce tree retention requirements, to remove any limits on grading and cutting and filling. Those are not modest adjustments. Those were significant adjustments. And I feel that had we made some of those compromises during our legislative process, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be spending money, or we wouldn't have spent money defending the city from an appeal from the petitioners, and we wouldn't be speaking about making an appeal to the Growth Management Hearings Board of this decision. Now, we have the option to comply with the requirements of this decision, which is they are remanding it back to council to make changes, and that's exactly what we can do. We can make changes based on the current record, based on new science, if that's what we determine we need to do, and still address the still address the needs of the area. And I say that, I'm careful about that because the Growth Management Hearings Board also mentions this idea that the city is balancing protection of critical areas with development potential. And I'll read here that the board is aware of no statutory authority to support the city's theory that, quote, balancing protection of critical areas with the city's achievement of anticipated development is within its discretion. So you can't just say we need to balance these interests and say that's the final word because we said so. The board is saying you can't do that. They also go on to say, yes, we have a critical areas ordinance. Yes, we are citing adherence to the 2012 Department of Ecology manual. But what it also says is that that manual is not sufficient enough. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact citation in front of me. And that local jurisdictions are encouraged to adopt land use policies to give additional protections where protections are warranted. So I think that it is a mistake for us to move forward with an appeal when the board has been very clear that they feel that we have made a serious and clearly erroneous mistake. And we can rectify this not by engaging more legal services and spending more taxpayer money. We can rectify this by having the council re-discuss this area, maybe include new science. And I would like to leave finally with, let me just reiterate that this will be a substantial cost to the city to file this appeal. And based on our latest budget status report, quarter number 1, the general fund's operating deficit for the first quarter was, of the 8-quarter biennium, was $25,459. So we're operating at a general fund operating deficit and yet considering spending more money to appeal a decision that we can work on up here without incurring additional cost. So if there is a motion to appeal this board's decision, I will be opposing it.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak on this matter?
We don't have a motion before us, correct?
We do not currently have a motion.
I'll make one.
I'll reserve my comments for deliberation.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I would authorize the city attorney to pursue an appeal of the Growth Management Hearing Board decision in Agard v. the City of Bothell, and I would authorize the city to spend the resources necessary to conduct scientific studies to see what the appropriate best available science is in this area.
Anybody wish to speak to the motion? Councilmember Sandberg.
I'll be voting no. And just so the public knows, we're talking about substantial legal fees to mount an appeal, and we're also talking about substantial fees to hire a consultant to update any additional science. And I'm in support of hiring a consultant to update the science, the best available science, to inform our decision going forward on this area. I'm not comfortable in hiring a consultant in the context of filing an appeal, in the context of defending the city's decision. So I think we're spending an awful lot of money, and we're not even talking about how much it is.
Okay, Councilmember Agnew.
I will not be supporting the motion. I'll read again. The board has a firm and definite conviction that a mistake has been made. The Ordinance 2163 is clearly erroneous in view of the entire record before the board and in light of the goals and requirement of the GMA. I'm not a lawyer. I don't even try to be one. I didn't even sleep at a Holiday Inn Express. But I can tell you one thing in my mind, that looks like an appeal may not work real well. I think that we need to take a look at this, probably get some scientific data to prove what we need to do and how we need to do things to meet the GMA.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I'm going to be supporting the motion. I understand what the board said and their words that have been shared with us tonight. But mistakes are made. Mistakes are made all the time in the judicial system, and those get overturned later on by appeal or by new evidence or whatever. So I think that having another set of eyes look at this is the appropriate thing to do. There's, in my opinion, at the time we were making no major changes to our plan and to the protections that we had there. In fact, we added some things that weren't there before. We did some good things in realigning, taking away the 39th connector and doing the realignment on that. As far as the science goes, just for good business, we need to have that science. But also that to preserve our rights as a city for other areas that may affect current homeowners and their property if they live on or near other bodies or water, that we, this could have an effect on those codes also. So we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing for this, not just this area, but for the city as a whole. And we need to make sure that we're protecting those homeowners' rights throughout the city, because this could have a ramification bigger than just this area. And so that's why we'd be supporting the appeal.
Great, thank you. You wish to speak to your motion?
I do, thanks. So the motion that I'm making, to be very, very clear, is twofold. One is to authorize our city to expend resources to get the best available science for what should be done for this area. And that is important. That is important whether this appeal was here or not. And I think everybody should be supporting that. I think that's an important thing for our city to do. This is an important natural resource that's within our city, and I think that's the right thing to do. That, as Deputy Mayor Spivey indicated, on balance, the changes that we made as a city council improved the environment. We took away the 39th connector, which was the largest single impact to this area environmentally, bar none. And by doing that, I think we need to have a scientific assessment, the best available science, to say, what is the right thing to do for our city? What's the right thing for our environment to do? And that's what this motion will do. It will also preserve the legal rights of our city if the result of that scientific study is to suggest that we as a city could do something different with what we have. I look forward to the results of that scientific study. I think that a city should be looking at best available science. That's something obviously that featured very prominently in this decision, but I think independent of the decision, it's the right thing to do. The Growth Management Hearings Board decision has been quoted several times. I have great respect for the Growth Management Hearings Board. They aren't judges, but I think they're good people trying to do the right thing. Ms. Agard has lost before the Growth Management Hearings Board before as well. That doesn't mean necessarily that she was wrong. It just means that the conclusion that they came to was different, and she elected not to appeal those decisions. I think this is the right thing to do as a city. I think it's very important to understand that on balance, the changes that we made in November of last year were positive for the environment, were a net gain for the environment because of the 39th connector. And to understand that the regulations that are being defended in this case would require property owners to either put 40% of their property in forested open space or 50% of their property in forested open space. If anyone believes, looking around Bothell, looking around Snohomish County, that is somehow gutting an ordinance or is weakening it or making it somehow not workable, I would suggest that you read the ordinance, not just the decision, not just captions of the decision, but actually read the law. Do the hard work. Go in and look what it said and look what it does for the environment, because I think that's important.
Great, thank you. Everybody's had a chance to speak. So now the motion on the floor was made by Councilmember Land, seconded by Councilmember Freed. If all can place their vote. We'll see if it works this time. The clerk can display. Passes 3-2. So that brings us to the conclusion of the matter and the conclusion of our meeting this evening. Thank you, everybody, for attending.